All right, so you're in the right spot if you're as curious as I am about all this talk about Bukayo Saka's future at Arsenal. We got some pretty interesting stuff to look at today. We've got an article from a, seasoned sports writer, and then, kind of surprisingly, a football gear review that might actually give us more insight than you'd think.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Sometimes you can find these little nuggets of insight into a player's mindset from these kind of seemingly unrelated sources.
Totally. So let's jump into that Daily Store article first. They've got Arsenal legend Alan Smith chiming in, and basically he's suggesting that Saka's loyalty, well, it kind of hinges on whether the Gunners can get their hands on some major trophies.
It's interesting because Smith comes right out and says how hard it is to even define world class. But he doesn't hesitate to praise Saka's talent and work ethic.
He even goes as far as calling Saka a model professional, and that's got to be high praise coming from someone like Alan Smith. But here's where things get even more interesting. Saka's contract actually runs until 2027, so that throws a whole other wrench in the works, right?
Sure. Oh, for sure. I mean, the contract says one thing, a certain level of commitment. But Smith's comments make you wonder if maybe Saka has some unspoken conditions. Like maybe his commitment is contingent on Arsenal proving they can compete at the highest level.
That's a really good point. It's almost like we're getting a sneak peek behind the curtain of these contract negotiations. So this brings us to our second source, which is, as I mentioned, kind of out of left field. 442, it's a pretty respected football publication. They did a review of Saka's boots, the ones he prefers, the New Balance Furon V7 Plus Pro, and of course they couldn't resist mentioning the Black Friday discount.
Well, who can resist a good Black Friday deal?
Yeah.
But it's kind of funny. You've got this potentially huge career decision happening.
Yeah.
And we're talking about it in the context of Black Friday sale. Maybe there's more to that juxtaposition than we realize.
You think so? Well, it's not just about the sale. The review really goes into the technology behind these boots, the lightweight materials, the design, all these features that are supposed to help with speed and accuracy on the field. And then they bring up Saka's stats this season. 8 assists and 4 goals in just 11 Premier League appearances. It's pretty clear he's serious about his game.
No doubt about that. And that's where I see a connection between these two sources. They seem totally different, but they both point to Saka's drive and ambition.
So are we looking at a player who's putting individual success ahead of team trophies?
That's the question a lot of top players are dealing with these days. We're definitely seeing a shift in football. Individual brands and global recognition are becoming more and more important.
You're right. It's not just about the club anymore. Players are building their own empires, and that's definitely going to factor into their career choices. But I wonder how much that weighs on Saka's mind. I mean, he's still young, relatively early in his career.
That's a great point. It brings up a bigger discussion about how things are changing between clubs and players, especially now with social media and global fandom.
Now that's where things get really interesting.
Oh yeah, absolutely. This idea of being loyal to a club, it's being challenged by the allure of individual branding, lucrative endorsements, building a personal legacy. It's a whole new ballgame.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Before we get ahead of ourselves, you mentioned this trend of players putting themselves first. Why do you think that's happening? Is it just ego, or is there more to it?
I think it's a mix of things. Social media has given players this platform to build their own brands. They're not just footballers anymore. They're influencers, entrepreneurs, global personalities, and that comes with its own opportunities and pressures.
So they're kind of like building their own businesses separate from the club.
Exactly. And as their individual brand grows, so does their earning potential. Endorsements, sponsorships, merchandise lines, it can be really lucrative. And a lot of that depends on the player's individual recognition, not just the team's success.
That makes sense. So a player like Saka, if he thinks his brand will do better at a different club, or by winning individual awards, that could outweigh his loyalty to Arsenal.
It's definitely possible, and clubs are aware of this. They know that to attract and keep top talent, they can't just offer good salaries and trophies. They have to cater to these individual aspirations.
This is really interesting. It changes how we think about player decisions, but how does all of this connect back to Saka and his situation at Arsenal?
Well, if you consider Saka's ambition, his drive to improve, and this whole trend of building a personal brand, it raises some interesting questions about what Arsenal needs to do to keep him at the club for the long haul, about what Arsenal needs to do to keep him at the club for the long haul.
Yeah, it's like we're putting together a puzzle, We've got these pieces of Saka's mindset, his drive to be the best, how seriously he takes his training, and we're trying to see how they all fit into his bigger career goals.
Exactly. And it's not all about money and trophies, right? It's about creating a place where a player like Saka feels valued, challenged, Like he can really reach his potential, both individually and with the team.
Which takes me back to Alan Smith saying Arsenal need to win those big trophies to keep Saka happy. But what if it's not just about the trophies? What if it's more about proving they can compete at that level consistently, bringing in other top players and building a squad that's a contender year after year?
That's a really important point. For someone as ambitious as Saka, it's not enough to have one good season. It's about where the club is going, the long-term plan.
So Arsenal needs to show they're serious about being one of the best, not just hoping for a good season here and there.
Exactly. And that's the tough part. European football is super competitive. There are a few clubs that seem to be on a whole other level financially. Arsenal needs to find a way to close that gap, not just with money, but by attracting and developing world-class talent.
That's a big challenge. But let's play devil's advocate for a second. What if, even with Arsenal's best efforts, they can't reach that level? Could Saka's own ambition push him to look for a club that's already at the top of European football?
It's definitely a possibility. It's a tough choice a lot of talented players have to face. Do you stay loyal to the club that helped you grow, even if it means maybe missing out on some individual success? Or do you chase the most competitive environment, even if it means leaving behind the people and fans you know?
Those are some hard decisions, and at the end of the day, only Saka can say what's really important to him. But here's something I've been thinking about. Wouldn't leaving Arsenal actually hurt Saka's brand? He's really loved there, he represents what the club is all about. Could that loyalty from the fans actually play a part in his decision?
That's an interesting angle. It shows how valuable that connection between a player and the fans can be. In some ways, that bond could be just as important as any endorsement deal, because it's real, genuine support, a true emotional connection.
Yeah, it's like we're seeing this clash between old and new ideas, the traditional loyalty to a club versus this modern focus on building your own brand and global recognition. And with Saka, it seems like both of those are at play.
Absolutely, you're spot on. It's a complicated situation with lots of factors, and there's no easy answer. But that's what makes it so interesting to analyze. We're trying to figure out what's motivating a young guy who's dealing with the complexities of a global sport, trying to balance personal ambition with a sense of belonging and loyalty.
It's almost Shakespearean, you know? The inner conflict, the big decisions, the possibility of success or failure. And it's all happening in one of the most passionate and demanding sports in the world. But let's not forget, we're talking about a young guy's career here. He's got time to figure things out, consider his options, and make the choices that feel right for him, both personally and professionally.
We're right, it's easy to get caught up in all the hype and speculation. But in the end, this is Saka's journey, and we should respect his right to make his own choices, even if we don't agree with them.
Very well said. But that doesn't mean we can't have some fun speculating and analyzing. I mean, that's part of what makes being a football fan so great, right? The debates, the discussions, sharing the passion for the game and the players.
Oh, absolutely. And who knows, maybe this whole booth thing is just a clever marketing trick by New Balance, using all the transfer talk to their advantage.
Wouldn't be the first time. But even if it is, it sparked this really interesting conversation about how things are changing in football and the challenges players like Saka face as they try to navigate the pressures of a global sport.
Definitely a conversation worth having. And it's one that's going to keep evolving as the game changes and adapts to what this new generation of players and fans want.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about Saka, the pressures he might be facing, all the things that could affect his decision. But what about Arsenal? What can they do to keep him around? Is it just about throwing money at him and winning trophies, or is there more to it?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? I think it goes beyond just money and immediate success. Arsenal has to show they have a clear vision for the future, something that lines up with what Saka wants for his career.
So it's like painting this picture of where the club's going and showing him how he fits into that.
Exactly. They need to convince him that Arsenal is the place for him to develop, to reach his goals, to be part of something special. It's about building that belief, that shared sense of purpose.
That makes me think of clubs like Man City and Bayern Munich. They've been really successful lately, and they've managed to attract and keep top players, not just with huge salaries, but by creating this culture of excellence.
Yeah, that winning mentality, it's everywhere in those organizations.
You're right. It's about building a system, a philosophy that players really buy into. Having a manager who inspires and motivates, who can bring everyone together and use individual talent for the benefit of the whole team. And that's maybe where Arsenal has an advantage, right? They've got Arteta, a young manager who's already shown he can develop young players and build that team spirit. Could that be the key to keeping Saka?
It could be. Arteta seems to know exactly the style of football he wants to play, and he's not afraid to give young players a chance. If he can keep building on what he's done, show that he's serious about helping Saka grow, that could be a huge factor.
It's like this delicate ecosystem, you know? You've got the club's ambition, the manager's vision, the money, the team dynamics, and of course what the player wants, his own goals and motivation. It all has to work together for someone like Saka to feel happy and committed.
That's a great way to put it. It's this complex mix of things, and you can't really predict how it's all going to play out. But that's what makes it so interesting to watch and try to figure out.
It reminds me of what you said earlier about how things are changing between clubs and players. We're moving away from that era of players staying with one club their whole careers, that blind loyalty. Players have more power now, more choices, and they're not afraid to make decisions that are good for their careers and their personal lives.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It makes clubs step up their game, pay attention to what their players need, and create environments where players can grow individually, but also succeed as a team.
So let's say you're Saka. What are you looking for? What would make you stay at a club?
It would have to be more than just trophies and a big paycheck. I'd want to feel valued, respected, challenged. To be part of a team with a clear identity, a shared goal, a real desire to achieve something great together. To know that I'm in a place where I can grow, learn, and push myself to be my best on and off the field.
That's a really powerful statement, and it gets to the core of what we've been talking about today. In the end, a player's decision is about more than just the contract or the club's reputation. It's about finding the right fit, the place where their talent can shine and their dreams can come true. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Bukayo Saka's future, I want to leave you with this. If you were Arsenal, what would you do to convince him to stay? How would you create that perfect environment, that balance of individual ambition and team success? It's something to think about as we wait and see how this all unfolds. Until next time.
Thanks for tuning in to The Sound of Sport TV, where we bring you the latest sports news and the hottest beats to keep your energy high. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more thrilling updates. Until next time, stay tuned and stay sporty.